So for those who don't know Télécoms sans frontières, Télécoms sans frontières or Telecom Without Borders is the first emergency telecommunication NGO. It's the first, but it's not the only one, okay? So we call it the first because TSF was created more than 20 years ago, exactly 21 years ago, by two humanitarians, French humanitarians, that used to go in the field to perform normal quote-unquote humanitarian action, you know, like health, food, etc. But they realized that there was a lack for communication in the field. They realized that because they had a lot of people, refugees and people victims of crisis, that were giving to them a piece of paper with a number written on it, and they were telling them, look, when you come back to your country, please call this number and tell them that I'm okay, tell them that I made it. So based on this, they decided to create Télécoms sans frontières, and they created it in 1998, as you can see. And they started their first humanitarian calling operation with the Kosovo War in 1998. Then relevant mission followed, like the 2004 tsunami in the Pacific, 2010 Haitian earthquake, 2012 Syrian conflict, and in 2015 we were covering the European migration crisis. Last year we deployed into emergency mission in the Mozambique. I don't know if you remember that the Mozambique was hit last year twice by two powerful cyclones, and we deployed also in the Bahamas. So that was recently, the Bahamas was in September. I don't know if you guys remember that the Bahamas was hit by a very powerful cyclone as well. So our international headquarters are in France, in the south of France, and this is where I am calling you from right now. But as you can see, we have a regional base in Latin America, and another one in the Asia Pacific. And that helps us to cover the entire world on a 24-hour basis for any emergency and deployments. We also have a US representative and a UK representative that help us with representation and official meetings, I would say. So this is a little bit how we are organized. Since 1998, we have been able to help 20 million people. We deployed in more than 70 countries, covering more than 140 major crises and helping over 800 NGO. On the next slide, you will see a little bit more how we are organized. So as I was telling you before, we have our international headquarters where you will find our boards of directors. And from there, the direction, our department of R&D, project and coordination, finance, fundraising, communication, that's my department. And then we have our regional bases here and there, okay? And as I was telling you, they help us to cover the entire world and to deploy. So when we deploy, generally, we deploy a few people, technicians from our headquarters, and also a few people from the regional base, so staff and also volunteers. So the core of TSF is disaster response. That's the core mission of TSF. And TSF started like this 20 years ago. Through the years, we have developed more missions or sectors of interventions, like capacity building, education, protection and assistance, and bridging the digital divides. And I will go further into these sectors when I will show you examples very soon in this presentation. So there are two types of emergency response and crisis, I would say. Climate disaster, right? So typhoons, earthquake, tsunamis, etc., and what we call human-made disaster, so conflicts. All right. And then we have a third type of crisis that we call protracted crisis, or also long-term crisis or complex crisis. These are some of the crises we also deploy. So usually a crisis starts with an emergency, type a climate disaster or human-made disaster, and when it lasts in time, it becomes what we call a protracted crisis. Okay, and this is when we are going to start talking about intervention like education, protection and assistance, bridging the digital divide that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so everything starts with an emergency. And when the crisis lasts, and you will see example of that, then we can talk about the education, protection and assistance. Maybe it's not very clear, but when you will see example, it will maybe become clearer. So this is an example of an emergency mission we deployed to last year. That's the very last, well, this year actually, sorry. That's the very last mission we deployed to, Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas. So when we deploy into an emergency mission, we have two types of operation for the population, and operation for the coordination, humanitarian coordination. So what you can see here is a typical operation for the population. So you have to know that after an hurricane, communication are often cut, or people have lost their phone, they don't have money to buy credit, etc. So we go and see this population and we offer them free satellite communication, as you can see here. And then a second type of operation we run during this type of crisis is support to humanitarian coordination. You cannot see too much, but this is a setup for humanitarians where they all gather and operate, basically, run their operation, logistic, administration, etc. On this type of location, they need a connection. And as I was telling you before, sometimes connections are down, the local operator is not working, so they cannot operate. So we come and we set up satellite communication for them. We have partnership with the UN. So when the UN is on the field, we usually go there and set up a communication for them. So you can see how important it is for the population. This is a testimony from Cyclone Idai in the Mozambique. Also, that was in March this year, May this year. So we deploy there and we provide free calls to the population. And for them, as they say here, it was very important because the population lost their phone. They have no money to buy credit, nor electricity to charge their device. Here there is another example of testimonial from this time humanitarian coordinator. Yeah. So for him, TSF provide critical communication, voice and data, so that they could run their operation. And here we have another example of type of crisis, and that was what I was trying to explain to you before. Syria. Everything started 2012 as an emergency. We deployed there, but it turns out we are still there, more than 8 years after. This is the typical example of what I called before a protracted crisis, a long-term crisis. It was an emergency, but then we discovered that this crisis lasts in the time, and it created other issues, like the issue of the refugees that are stuck into refugee camps, and where children lack of access to regular school. So in this type of crisis, through our R&D department, we develop specific technologies to respond to these very specific needs. So here the need is palliate the lack of education given to the long-term aspect of this crisis. And to this, we develop what we call the TSF M-Learning Kit, which is a kit. I'm going to show you on the next slide a little bit more technically. Provides access to digital educational resources via tablets. These resources are available offline. The tablets are autonomous, and we use free resources such as Khan Academy or Wikipedia. Another example of this type of long-term crisis is the migration crisis that is happening right now along the Central American migratory route. So here we have set up screens, as you can see here, in several shelters, 8 of them now, where we provide migrants and refugees with valuable information for their journey, quote unquote. The need here is for them is to be able to access crucial information, to be able to make the good decision on their path, on their journey, and to reduce their vulnerability. Excuse me. And for this, also we have developed this solution, which consists of screens set up in key strategic locations, so shelters, community center, etc., along the route, so that migrants can gather and see the information. These screens are remotely managed by the local association who run the center or the shelter. So we collaborate with them, they provide the content, and we provide the technological equipment and support to run this technology. And this is the last example of a protracted crisis. You may have heard a lot about the Venezuelan crisis. A lot of people from Venezuela left their country to go to Colombia, Brazil. So TSF decided in April 2008 to deploy over there and to offer priority calls for Venezuelan migrants in Brazil. The problem here is that these people who left their country in Brazil with no money, no phones, sometimes they do have phone, but they don't have money to charge them, and they need to call their family back in Venezuela to ask them if they're okay, if they need something, to tell them that they have sent them money, because what they do is that they go to Brazil to work and to send money back to Venezuela to their families, right? So they need this type of communication. So for this, we have developed a technology that uses telephony over IP. You can see it, on the next slide. That solution is very flexible and very cost effective because it uses analogic phones and works on any type of connection, satellite, landlines, etc. And we can provide with simultaneous calls, and it's very cost efficient. TSF has a very good expertise. TSF develops its own solution here at the headquarters, adapted to the necessity of the field. So we use the last technology that are often made for first world country. They work very well in first world country. But when you take this technology in the field, sometimes they lack of something. So our IT experts here tweak these technologies to make them fit with the necessity of the field. And that's a particularity of TSF.
Do you invent this stuff all yourself, or do you work with sort of the military, for example, the Royal Signals, who obviously do similar stuff in the field in their battlefields? So do you collaborate with people like that?
Yes, we do. So we collaborate with many people, actually. So we do have partnerships, as I was I mentioned before with the UN. So the emergency response of the UN, it's OCHA, so it's the Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, and they have an emergency response team called UNDAC. So we have partnership with them, and we train them, and we also collaborate with them in the field. We also have a partnership with the ETC, so Emergency Telecommunication Cluster. It's also a UN cluster that gathers other NGO, that work in technology and other fields, and we collaborate with them in the field. And then when we deploy, what you have to know is that usually when TSF deploys, it decides to deploy by himself, right? It's a one-way decision. It's a TSF decision. And then once in the field, usually we start collaborating with the UN or with other organizations. Could be local organizations or international organizations, like the Red Cross, MSF, things like that.
All right, thank you.
So now let's talk a little bit about our spendings. So 90% of our spendings go to the field, basically. And then 4% it's for general management here at the headquarters, and then 1% for fundraising. 80% of our fundings is corporate. So TSF relies on companies, mainly from the telco industry, to fund our missions. 7%, as you can see, is institutional, and 12% is other. Actually, I'm not sure what's included in other right now. Yeah, I have a doubt, sorry about that. And then 1% is a private donation. So it's a very, very small part that since 20 years, TSF never rely on private donation. Now it's changing a little bit, so we hope to have this number increased. But what you have to remember from that is that, almost 90% of TSF fundings is private, thanks to this partner that you can see here, right?
Is that why you're maybe not so well known as some of the other, like Médecins Sans Frontières, etc.? Because
yes,
they do rely more on individual donations as well as corporate.
Yes, it's one of the reasons. The other reason is that TSF remains a human-sized organization, and that's a will from our direction. They never wanted to go big. And that allows us to remain very independent and to deploy very easily. It's a policy here. It's the way TSF is. So these are our partners, and everything is possible thanks to their support. Yeah, what I wanted to add to finish, because this will end my presentation, is that TSF relies on a lot of networking in the telco industry. A lot of our partners that you can see here, we have very, very special relation with them. And they help us a lot. And they also help us to meet other partners that can help us, to punctually fund our missions or help us with logistics in mission. And I will conclude with this. I can also invite you to watch our YouTube account. We do have on our YouTube account a little video that very well introduces the core missions of TSF, and plenty of other videos that you can see, and you will understand a little bit more what it's like to be on mission. Yes, so I really invite you to have a look at this, and of course to follow us on social media as well.
Over a week after a killer typhoon struck the Philippines, the aid effort is starting to pick up steam. A top UN humanitarian says more than 107,000 people have received food assistance so far. 11 foreign and 22 domestic medical teams are in operation. One of the many things left in ruins, though, after the typhoon is the country's telecommunications capabilities.
Hello? Everything is okay. That's all I wanted to say.
Key to the success of those relief efforts is telecommunications.
This NGO applies innovative technologies to assist vulnerable people in any type of crisis.
as well, is progress with telecoms technology is
Yes.
helping your task in general, so better satellite coverage,
Oh, yeah.
4G, 5G networks, or do you find that when disaster strikes, particularly in privileged countries, it doesn't really help your task?
Oh, yes, if I understood well your question, progress with technology does help us a lot. I hope I will understand well. So TSF was created 20 years ago. It started, and that's why it's called Télécoms sans Frontières. Everything started at the beginning as purely telecom, purely phone. Through the years, the NGO had to evolve, and now we not only provide satellite phone calls, but we also provide free Wi-Fi for the population. And our operation definitely evolves with the technology. For example, 10 years ago, people did not have their own phone with them, or they did not have smartphone. Now they have smartphone. So sometimes they are not interested in placing a call, but they are more interested in connecting to Facebook to check or to safety check on Facebook or to use WhatsApp through their smartphone. And as technology evolves, our way of responding to an emergency evolves as well. And that's why here at the headquarters, we have a R&D department that constantly is trying new technology. And as I was telling you before, uses this new technology to adapting them to the contingencies of the field.
Thank you.
And that question was asked by Martin, who chairs Raspberry Pi as well. So it was very interesting to see the Raspberry Pi being mentioned there. I'm sure his R&D department would love to talk to your R&D department. So
we do use a Raspberry Pi on a lot of things we develop.
Good. So Isabel, I know something that's different to a lot of the other charities we talk to is about how you get your resources. So we know that your money comes predominantly from corporates and that you get some technological help from those big telcos as well. But could you tell us a bit more about how you staff your campaigns and programs? Because there's some quite complicated technologies that you're using there. So who are the people that actually work for TSF?
So these are IT specialists. We have our IT specialists here at the headquarters that work with them since a lot of years now. And then when we deploy in the field, we call local volunteers. And these people are, so we have partnership, right, from our two bases that you have seen, from the America base and the Asian base. We have partnerships with schools. For example, in Asia, we have a partnership with the Asian Institute of Technology. And there, twice a year, we train the students to our way of responding to an emergency. The technology we use, the way we respond, the way we deploy, etc. Twice a year, we train them. Once they are trained, they become part of a pool that we can rely on when we have a deployment. So when we see that we need to deploy, we will start contacting these people and say, hey, are you available like in 5 hours for a deployment? Or in less than 24 hours, because TSF deploys in less than 24 hours. Same in America, we have a partnership with IBM and Intel, and we train their technicians. So they already are technicians, they know a lot about telecommunication, etc. But on top of that, we train them to our way of responding to an emergency, so that once again they become part of the pool and we can call them anytime for deployment.
Marvelous, thank you. So last question then, and the question we ask everyone is there any way you think that the Virtual Company of Information Technologists could help you as an organization?
Yeah, since I was telling you before, we rely a lot on networking, people networking. specifically in the industry, in the telco industry. I'm sure you and all the people who are around you tonight know a lot of people. If they can think of a way to introduce us to some relevant people of a particular company, that's the way I can see you guys can probably help us. Here we have 2 persons working for fundraising, and these people also work closely with the communication department, and we go to some events, and we try to raise the word about TSF and raise the awareness in events like, you may know, Capacity Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So on this type of event where we create networking opportunities that help us to raise the awareness about TSF and eventually have people from the telco industry contacting us and being willing to fund us on a specific project, or fund us on a regular basis.
Is Verizon one of your US partners?
No, we have Vodafone Foundation, and so I believe because of maybe Vodafone or AT&T, there, sometimes there are conflicts, so we cannot have, some partners are a little bit, it's delicate, right? So yes. Vodafone and AT&T are the 2 of our biggest partners, and I believe because of this reason, we don't have Verizon, or we have not reached out to Verizon. But if somebody knows anybody at Verizon, maybe we can still talk. I'm not sure. I should, I should talk to our fundraising specialist, our head of fundraising, who knows more about all these potential conflicts than I do. So if you guys have any idea, just shoot it, and we can give it a try.
Well, that's great, and already in the room, it looks like we've got a potential lead there. So, and this was why we wanted to record this, so that we could share wider than the people who've been able to attend this evening. So we'll make sure that when we do that, we direct people with how they can follow up on those leads with us, and we'll do that with the one in the room as well. So, Isabel, thank you very much for your time. This has been really informative. I've been aware of you guys for some time, but understand that you're not have a very large public profile, and which was why I was keen to share with others. And this is a slightly different spin on how we use technology to combat homelessness. So for us, it was very interesting. Thank you very much for your time. And like I said, we'll hopefully build on this with our membership and see what more help we could give you personally as well.
Well, thank you very much. Just for inviting us to present TSF. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Isabel. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.